Welcome to the deep dive. We're going to try to untangle the story of Sean Diddy Combs. And wow, you've really sent us a lot of material. We've got a full biography here, news articles really focusing on the legal trouble he's been in lately, and even some of the social media reaction to it all. So I guess we're really looking at not just the success, but also the accusations that have really kind of overshadowed his career recently.
Yeah, it is really fascinating how different the narratives are. You've got this classic American dream success story on one hand, but then you have some very, very serious accusations on the other. So we'll be breaking it all down so you can really see the full picture.
Right, so let's start with the Diddy that most people know. You know, the music icon, the entrepreneur, the guy who seemed to be able to do it all. Even his early days are pretty remarkable, dropping out of Howard University to become a major force in hip-hop.
I mean, that's not your typical career path. It's an incredible journey, for sure. And when you think about his impact, it goes way beyond just the music. I mean, he founded Bad Boy Entertainment, worked with icons like Mariah Carey and Biggie. And his early albums, I mean, they went platinum, won Grammys. He made a huge impact very quickly.
There's that puffy confidence we all know. But did you know he actually got that nickname? In high school, I was reading that he used to puff out his chest to try to seem bigger. And even in college, he was already a hustler, running a shuttle service. It's like you can see those entrepreneurial instincts from the very beginning.
Yeah, that drive is a constant theme in all of this material. He wasn't content with just music. You see him getting into fashion with Sean John, which wasn't just some celebrity clothing line. It was one of the first truly successful high-fashion streetwear brands. I mean, he really pushed boundaries and influenced what we see in fashion today.
And he was also ahead of the curve with reality TV, wasn't he? Making the band, I mean, who could forget Danity Kane? That show was massive. And then he went on to Ciroc Vodka.
And that's another example of him seeing an opportunity and just going for it. He didn't just endorse Ciroc, he completely transformed the brand, turned it into a global phenomenon.
And it's interesting, too, to look at his attempt to buy the Carolina Panthers.
Oh, yeah. That's a detail that really reveals his ambition. He wanted to be the first African-American majority owner of an NFL team. Even though it didn't work out in the end, it says a lot about his drive and his desire to break barriers.
It really does. It makes you think about this constant striving, this constant evolution, always looking for the next challenge. But woven into all of this success, there are these whispers of a darker side, almost like this foundation was starting to crack.
Yeah, and with Cassie's lawsuit back in 2023, I think those cracks became impossible to ignore. The accusations were incredibly serious. We're talking about physical abuse, being forced to have sex with other men, even rape. The fact that the lawsuit was settled so quickly raised a lot of questions. And then that security footage that came out later on, it seemed to corroborate some of Cassie's claims. So it was really a turning point where the public had to start confronting these allegations.
And what's so striking is that it wasn't just an isolated incident. After Cassie's lawsuit, more accusers came forward with their own stories, painting a pretty disturbing picture. We have one woman who alleges that Combs drugged and raped her back in 1991, and then distributed a video of the assault without her consent.
And the accusations just keep escalating. There's another woman who says that she and a friend were assaulted by Combs in Aaron Hall, and that Combs later attacked her physically when she was only 16, trying to silence her. I mean, these are really disturbing allegations. It forces us to confront this huge disconnect between Combs' public image and these claims of abuse.
And it's important to note that this isn't just about individuals coming forward. There's also the lawsuit from Rodney Lil Rod Jones, who was a producer that worked with Combs. His lawsuit alleges sexual harassment and threats. So that brings the accusations into the professional realm as well.
And then you have Dawn Richards' lawsuit. And this is where things get really interesting. Because Dawn was a member of Danity Kane, the group that Combs put together on making the band. And her lawsuit alleges sexual assault and withholding of pay. So it brings those early reality TV days back into focus in a very different light.
It's like this domino effect, with each new accusation adding another layer to this story, and it becomes clear that this is more than just a few isolated incidents.
Absolutely. And as more and more came out, the legal situation escalated dramatically. You see a shift from civil lawsuits to a full-blown federal investigation. Back in March of this year, federal agents actually searched Combs' homes in LA and Miami as part of a sex trafficking investigation.
I remember when that news broke, it was a huge shock. And at first, it wasn't even clear if Combs himself was the target, but his lawyer was very quick to call it a witch hunt.
Yeah, and then just a few months later, it all came crashing down. Combs was arrested in New York City on a whole slew of charges. We're talking sex trafficking, forced labor, drug offenses, kidnapping, assault. even obstruction of justice. He was immediately jailed, denied bail, and is currently awaiting trial. I mean, it was a shocking fall from grace for someone who was once considered an icon.
It's hard to fathom the magnitude of those charges. And the impact on his career was immediate and severe. He resigned from Revolt TV. That Hulu reality show about him and his family canceled. He even had to return the key to New York City.
And it goes even further. Howard University, where he went to school, they rescinded his honorary degree, they shut down his scholarship program, and there's a docuseries in the works on Investigation Discovery, focusing specifically on these alleged crimes. So yeah, the fallout has been devastating across the board.
And then, just when you thought it couldn't get any more complex, attorney Tony Busby enters the picture with this bombshell announcement.
Right. Busby held a press conference, revealing that he is representing 120 new accusers, who are all planning to file lawsuits against Combs. And these accusations, they go back decades and cover a range of incredibly serious allegations. But we'll dig into that more in the next part of this deep dive.
Okay, I gotta admit, when I saw that number, 120 new accusers, I was just floored. What was your reaction to a number like that?
Yeah, it's unprecedented for sure. It definitely adds a whole new dimension to this already complicated story. Busby says he represents 60 men and 60 women, and the accusations go back decades. And what's really disturbing is that it's not just misconduct we're talking about here. These are serious claims of sexual assault and sex trafficking.
And it's not just the number, right? It's the nature of the allegations, too. Busby said that 25 of his clients were minors at the time of the alleged abuse. I mean, that just adds a whole other level of seriousness to this.
Absolutely. The youngest was only 9 years old at the time of the alleged abuse. Some of the accusers say they were drugged and assaulted at parties. Others say it happened during auditions or business meetings. Busby even claims that aspiring artists were coerced into these situations with promises of stardom, which, if true, points to a really troubling exploitation of power within the industry.
It's a lot to process, to be honest. I mean, we're talking about someone who is beloved, celebrated, and now we have these incredibly serious accusations from so many people. It's hard to reconcile those two realities.
It is. It's tough. I think a lot of people are struggling with how to even think about Combs now. Can you still listen to his music, enjoy his work? Can you separate the art from the artist? There are no easy answers.
And with so many people coming forward, it makes you wonder about the culture of the industry itself, you know? Is this a case of one bad apple? Or is this a symptom of a larger problem?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, we've seen similar situations in recent years. Powerful figures in the entertainment industry accused of abuse and exploitation. This case, with the sheer number of accusers and the range of allegations, it definitely makes you think about power dynamics and how we create safer environments.
It's a sobering reminder that even those we might admire can do terrible things. And it's so important to listen to survivors and believe them. Their stories need to be heard. And we need to create a space where they feel empowered to come forward.
Absolutely. It's about shifting the focus from protecting the powerful to empowering the vulnerable. It's about changing the culture so that abuse is not tolerated and survivors feel safe coming forward.
It's also a reminder that justice can be a long and complicated process. Combs is innocent until proven guilty, and we need to respect due process.
Right, and it's important to remember these are still allegations. The legal process needs to play out. Combs deserves the opportunity to defend himself against these charges.
This whole situation brings up so many questions about power, accountability, celebrity. I mean, where do we even begin to unpack all of this?
Well, I think it starts with acknowledging the complexity of it all. You have someone who achieved incredible success, built an empire, seemed to represent the American dream in many ways. But then you have these very serious, very disturbing accusations. And we can't just ignore those.
It's like we're looking at two completely different stories and trying to figure out how they fit together.
Exactly. I think it's up to each of us to really process this information, think critically about it. What does this story mean to you? How do you reconcile these two seemingly contradictory narratives? Like I said, there are no easy answers, but these are important questions to grapple with.
One thing that I kept thinking about is that many of these accusations are from years ago. It makes you wonder why these individuals didn't come forward sooner.
It's a really good point. And it goes back to that power dynamic we were discussing earlier. It can be incredibly difficult to come forward against someone like Sean Combs, someone with that level of power and influence. There's fear of retaliation, fear of not being believed, maybe even fear of harming their own career.
And let's be honest, society hasn't always been kind to people who accuse powerful individuals. It takes a lot of courage to come forward, knowing that you could face disbelief and scrutiny.
And sometimes It takes time for survivors to process what happened to them, to find the strength to speak out. There's no timeline for when someone should come forward. It's a personal decision, and we have to respect that.
It's easy to get caught up in the headlines and the legal back and forth, but we have to remember, we're talking about real people who have experienced real trauma.
Exactly. And as the legal process plays out, I think it's essential to have these broader conversations about how we create a culture where abuse is not tolerated and where survivors feel supported.
It's not just about holding individuals accountable, it's about systemic change. It's about examining the power structures that allow abuse to happen in the first place and working to dismantle those structures.
And education is key. We need to be teaching young people about healthy boundaries, about consent, about their rights, especially those who are entering industries like music and entertainment.
It's about creating an environment where people feel empowered to speak up and where they know they will be heard and believed.
This whole situation is incredibly complex, emotionally charged. There's so much to unpack and no easy answers. But one thing's for sure, this is a conversation that needs to happen.
We've talked a lot about the accusations and the legal side of things, but we haven't really gotten to the specifics of the alleged crimes. What exactly is Combs being accused of?
Oh, that's a good point. So let's break down those charges. The most serious are sex trafficking and forced labor, which are incredibly serious offenses. Basically, they allege that Combs exploited individuals for sexual purposes and forced them to work against their will.
I remember when the news of the investigation first broke. A lot of people were shocked by those charges. Can you explain a bit more about what those charges actually mean?
Sure. So sex trafficking involves recruiting, harboring, transporting, or obtaining a person for commercial sex. And it's induced by force, fraud, or coercion. In this case, it's alleged that Combs used his power and influence to coerce individuals into sexual situations. And forced labor is about compelling someone to work against their will, often through threats, violence, or other forms of coercion.
And in addition to those charges, there's kidnapping, assault, drug offenses, and obstruction of justice, right?
That's right. The kidnapping and assault charges relate to allegations of violence and coercion. The drug offenses probably have to do with evidence found during the searches of his homes. And obstruction of justice suggests that he may have tried to interfere with the legal process, possibly by tampering with evidence or intimidating witnesses.
It's a lot, and it paints a very dark picture. But it's important to remember that these are still allegations. He hasn't been convicted of anything, and he deserves a fair trial.
Absolutely. We can't jump to conclusions. We have to let the legal process run its course. However, the seriousness of the charges and the number of accusers definitely warrant a thorough investigation and a fair trial.
So we have these incredibly serious charges, a mountain of accusations, and a legacy that's now hanging in the balance. What do you think the future holds for Sean Diddy Combs?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It's impossible to say for sure what's going to happen at this point.
The stakes are incredibly high. I mean, he's facing a potential life sentence if he's convicted on all charges.
And even if he's acquitted, the damage to his reputation might be impossible to repair. The sheer number of accusations and the severity of the alleged crimes, they've already cast a very long shadow over his legacy.
It's a story that's still unfolding, and we'll continue to follow it as it develops. But in the meantime, I think it's important for all of us to think about what we've learned from this deep dive.
Yeah, and to think about how this story fits into the bigger picture. The bigger conversation about power, accountability, and justice. It's not just about Sean Combs. It's about the systems and structures that allow for abuse to happen. And it's about how we create a world where everyone feels safe and respected, regardless of their power or status.
It's a really heavy topic, and I think what makes it especially hard is that we're not just talking about accusations anymore. We're talking about actual criminal charges with potentially life-altering consequences. It's just hard to grasp that someone who was so celebrated could now be facing a life sentence.
Yeah, it really does show you how complex people can be. Someone can achieve incredible things and still be capable of terrible things. And it's important to remember that the legal system, it's designed to figure out guilt or innocence based on evidence and a fair process, not on public opinion or past achievement.
We've seen this happen before, right? In high-profile cases where public opinion is already formed, before the legal process has even really begun. It's crucial to let the justice system play out and to reach a verdict based on facts, not just speculation or emotions.
And that's where things can get tricky when it comes to civil lawsuits. The concept of settling a lawsuit. It can be confusing for people because it doesn't necessarily mean guilt or innocence. It's often a strategic decision made for all sorts of reasons. And it doesn't prevent criminal charges from being filed later on.
Right. And in this case, we're seeing both civil lawsuits and federal criminal charges, which have different standards of proof. Like a civil lawsuit needs a preponderance of the evidence, meaning it's more likely than not that the person did it. But a criminal conviction needs proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a much higher standard.
And the federal investigation adds another layer to all of this, because it suggests that the alleged crimes might have crossed state lines or involved a whole network of people, which is why you see federal agencies like the FBI getting involved.
It seems like it's still early in the legal process, so what happens next? What can we expect to see?
Well, usually, after charges are filed, there's this process called discovery, where both sides gather evidence and build their cases. You might see motions filed, hearings, maybe even plea deals. And if the case actually goes to trial, a jury will decide Combs' fate.
Sounds like a pretty long and drawn-out process. And meanwhile, Combs is still in jail, right? He was denied bail. What does that tell us about how seriously they're taking these charges?
Being denied bail usually means that the judge thinks the defendant is a flight risk or a danger to the community. It's not a judgment of guilt, but it does indicate that the court thinks the allegations are serious.
And as this all plays out, there's also the question of how it affects Combs' legacy. He's such a huge figure in music and entertainment, but these allegations have really tarnished his accomplishments.
Yeah, it's almost like a Shakespearean tragedy. You know, this incredible rise to fame and fortune, followed by this devastating fall. It brings up those tough questions again about separating the art from the artist. Can you still enjoy Combs' music knowing what you know now? Can you appreciate his success in business while also acknowledging the harm he may have caused?
And there's the ripple effect too, right? What about the artists he worked with, the businesses he built, the people he influenced? How are they dealing with all of this?
It's a good point, because this deep dive isn't just about Sean Combs as a person. It's about the impact his actions have had on a whole community, on the industry, on society as a whole. It forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and accountability.
It's a reminder that you can never truly know what happens behind closed doors, and that even people we admire can do terrible things.
And I think it's a call to action for all of us. Be more vigilant, more willing to speak up against injustice, more committed to creating a world where this kind of abuse isn't tolerated.
We've covered so much ground today. But the biggest thing I'm taking away from this is that this isn't just a celebrity scandal. It's a story about humanity, about the complexities of power and fame, and about the fight for justice and accountability.
And as the story continues to unfold, it's important to remember that while the legal system is focused on guilt or innocence, we as individuals have a responsibility to really engage with these conversations, to use this as an opportunity for reflection and growth.
It's about asking ourselves the tough questions, examining our own biases, and working towards a world where everyone feels safe and respected.
We started this deep dive hoping to cut through all the noise, to give you a clear picture of both sides of this incredibly complex story. Hopefully we've done that.
And as always, we encourage you to keep learning about this, to talk about it with others, and to form your own conclusions. This is a story that will probably continue to develop, and it's one that deserves our attention and our critical thinking. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.